The paper trembled in Ethan Cole's hands as he stood in the HR director's office, the words "termination of employment" burning into his vision like a brand. 34 years old, 8 years with the company. And it had all come down to this single sheet that accused him of causing a server crash that cost DataStream Solutions nearly $200,000. He had tried to explain, tried to show them the timestamps didn't match, but no one had listened. Now, as he gathered the cardboard box containing his few personal belongings, he caught sight of his daughter through the glass partition. Lily, just 6 years old, stood in the hallway clutching her backpack straps. Her face, bright with the innocent excitement of a child who thought she was picking up her father for an early dinner. She didn't know. She couldn't know. Ethan lowered his head, fighting to keep his composure as he pushed through the door. And that was when Claire Ashford, CEO of DataStream Solutions, walked past. She paused, her sharp gray eyes taking in the scene. The defeated man, the termination letter visible in his grip, the small girl waiting with such pure trust. Without a word, Claire stepped forward and took the paper from Ethan's hand. Her eyes moved across the text, and something shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like recognition. She looked up at him, her gaze steady and unreadable. "Come with me," she said. Ethan didn't move at first. The words seemed foreign, impossible, like she had spoken in a language he had forgotten how to understand. Claire Ashford was not a woman who interacted with employees at his level. She existed in boardrooms and corner offices, in quarterly reports and investor calls. She was a name on emails he never received, a face he had seen only in company-wide presentations displayed on screens 3 floors above where he worked. And now she stood before him, holding the document that had just ended his career, telling him to follow her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Sir?" The HR director's voice came from behind him, uncertain and confused. "Miss Ashford, is there something I can help you with?" Claire didn't turn around. "No," she said simply. "Continue with your afternoon." The dismissal was absolute. Ethan watched the HR director's face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity before the man retreated back into his office, the door clicking shut with a sound that felt oddly final. And still Claire waited. The paper folded now in her hand, her posture suggesting that she had all the time in the world and none of it to waste on hesitation. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice broke through his paralysis. She had crept closer, her eyes wide as she looked between her father and the tall woman in the expensive charcoal suit. "Are we going home?" The question cut through Ethan like a knife. Home. Their small apartment in Tacoma, where the heating sometimes failed in winter and the walls were thin enough to hear every argument from the neighbors. Home, where Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator and her small bed sat in the corner of his room because they couldn't afford a 2-bedroom. Home, which he might not be able to keep now that his only source of income had just been ripped away. "Not yet, sweetheart," he managed to say. "We have to go somewhere first." Claire's gaze dropped to Lily, and for just a moment, her expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then she turned and began walking down the corridor, clearly expecting them to follow. Ethan took his daughter's hand, feeling her small fingers curl around his with complete trust, and started after the CEO of the company that had just fired him. The walk through DataStream's headquarters felt endless. The building was designed in that modern tech style, all glass walls and open floor plans, which meant that everyone could see them passing. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Ethan could feel the weight of every stare, could almost hear the questions forming in the minds of his former colleagues. Why was Claire Ashford personally escorting the man who had just been terminated for gross negligence? Why was there a child with them? What could possibly be happening? He kept his eyes forward, focused on Claire's straight back and measured stride. She moved through the space like she owned it, which of course she did. But there was something more to it than mere ownership. There was purpose. Intent. She walked like a woman who had seen something that didn't fit the picture she'd been given, and who intended to find out why. Lily pressed closer to his leg as they walked, intimidated by the stairs and the unfamiliar environment. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, trying to convey reassurance he didn't feel. He had no idea what was happening, no idea why one of the most powerful women in Seattle's tech industry had taken an interest in his termination. All he knew was that following her felt less terrifying than standing still. Then walking out those front doors with nothing but a box of desk photos and a reference letter that would never be written. They reached a small conference room at the end of a quiet hallway, away from the main work areas. Claire opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. The room was simple by corporate standards. A round table with 4 chairs, a window overlooking the gray Seattle skyline. A whiteboard that had been wiped clean. It felt private in a way that nothing else in this building did. "Sit," Claire said, and it wasn't a command so much as a permission. Ethan guided Lily to one of the chairs and helped her climb up onto it. She looked around the room with wide eyes, taking in every detail with the curiosity that only children possess. He sat down beside her, his cardboard box of belongings placed on the floor at his feet, and waited for whatever came next. Claire remained standing for a long moment, studying them both. Then she placed the termination letter on the table between them and took the seat across from Ethan. Her fingers were long and elegant, her nails unpainted, her only jewelry a simple watch that probably cost more than his car. She looked at him the way he imagined she looked at financial reports. Carefully, thoroughly, searching for the numbers that didn't add up. "Tell me what happened," she said. Not the official version, the truth. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications Ethan couldn't quite grasp. He had already tried telling the truth to his supervisor, to the HR director, to anyone who would listen. No one had believed him. The evidence had been clear. The server crash had originated from his workstation during his shift, using his credentials. It didn't matter that he had been nowhere near that terminal. It didn't matter that the timestamps in the log didn't match his actual location. Someone had needed a scapegoat, and he had been convenient. "I didn't do it," he said quietly. "I know that's what everyone says, but I didn't." "I'm not asking if you did it," Claire replied. "I'm asking you to tell me what happened." Ethan glanced at Lily, who was watching him with those big brown eyes that reminded him so painfully of her mother. Jessica had been gone for 3 years now, taken by a car accident that had left him a widowed father with a toddler and no family to help. Every decision since then had been about keeping Lily safe, keeping her fed, keeping her in a stable home. And now, even that was slipping through his fingers. "I was in the maintenance room on sub-level 2, he said finally. "Lily had a slight fever that morning, and I couldn't get anyone to watch her on such short notice. I know I shouldn't have brought her to work, but I couldn't afford to miss another day." He paused, shame coloring his voice. "There's a small break area down there. I set her up with some cartoons on my tablet while I ran diagnostics on the backup power systems. That's what I was doing when the server crashed. I wasn't anywhere near the main terminal." Claire's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. She looked at Lily, then back at Ethan, and her next question made his heart stop. "Do you actually believe the fault was yours?" The words seemed to echo in the small room, bouncing off the glass walls like a challenge. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Did he believe it? Part of him had started to wonder if he had somehow made a mistake, if there was some gap in his memory, some moment he had forgotten where he had accidentally triggered the cascade failure. Self-doubt had begun to creep in like poison, making him question his own recollection of that day. Lily reached over and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his with fierce protectiveness. She could sense his distress even if she didn't understand its source, and she responded the only way she knew how, by holding on. "No," Ethan said, and the word came out stronger than he expected. "No, I don't believe I did this. But I don't know how to prove it, and no one has given me the chance to try." Claire nodded slowly, as if his answer had confirmed something she had already suspected. She rose from her chair without another word and walked to the door. "Stay here," she said. "Both of you. I'll be back." And then she was gone, leaving Ethan and Lily alone in the conference room with nothing but questions and the dying afternoon light filtering through the Seattle clouds. The executive wing of DataStream Solutions existed in a perpetual state of controlled silence. Here, conversations happened in lowered voices. Decisions were made behind closed doors, and the air itself seemed to carry the weight of consequence. Claire Ashford moved through this environment like a native speaker of its unspoken language, her heels marking a precise rhythm against the polished floor as she headed toward her private office. Her assistant, Marcus, looked up as she approached. He was a young man of perhaps 28, efficient and discreet, with the kind of political instincts that made him invaluable in a company full of competing agendas. "Miss Ashford, your 3 o'clock with the Henderson Group has been confirmed, and legal wants to discuss the pending acquisition before end of day." "Push Henderson to tomorrow," Claire said, not breaking stride. "And tell legal I'll call them this evening. Is everything all right?" She paused at her office door, considering the question. "Pull the internal investigation file on the server incident from 3 weeks ago, the one that resulted in Cole's termination. I want the original system logs, security footage from all relevant areas, and the maintenance schedule for that entire week. Have it on my desk in 20 minutes. Marcus was too professional to show surprise, but she caught the slight widening of his eyes before he controlled it. "Of course. Anything else? Find out who approved the expedited termination. And don't let anyone know you're asking." She entered her office and closed the door behind her, allowing herself a moment of stillness in the sanctuary of her private space. The room was designed to project authority without ostentation. Clean lines, muted colors, a spectacular view of Elliott Bay that she rarely had time to appreciate. On her desk sat a framed photograph, the only personal item visible, showing a woman with silver hair and Claire's same gray eyes. Her mother, taken 3 months before the cancer had claimed her. Claire moved to her computer and began pulling up records herself, not willing to wait for Marcus. Something about this situation had triggered an instinct honed by 15 years in corporate leadership. An instinct that had saved her company from bad deals, bad hires, and worse scandals. The instinct was telling her now that the official story of Ethan Cole's negligence was incomplete at best, fabricated at worst. The termination report was straightforward on its surface. Server crash at 14:32 on a Tuesday afternoon. Catastrophic data loss affecting 3 major client accounts. Origin traced to workstation 7 in the primary server room. Login credentials. E. Cole. Recommendation: immediate termination for cause. No severance, no appeal. But Claire hadn't built a tech company from a garage startup to a $200 million enterprise by accepting surface explanations. She pulled up the raw system logs, the ones that existed before they were compiled into the neat summary that had crossed her desk for approval. And there, buried in the timestamps, she found the first anomaly. The crash had been initiated at 14:32 and 18 seconds. But Ethan Cole's badge had scanned at the sub-level 2 maintenance area at 14:31, where it had remained for another 47 minutes before scanning again at the elevator. A person could not be in 2 places at once. Either the badge system was wrong, or the crash report was. She pulled up the security footage next, fast-forwarding through hours of empty hallways until she reached the relevant time frame. The server room camera showed workstation 7 clearly. At 14:32, someone sat at that terminal. But the angle was wrong, the face turned away, and the image quality too poor to make a positive identification. What Claire could see, however, was that the figure wore a dark jacket, not the light blue maintenance uniform that was standard for Cole's department. 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived with the physical files she had requested. Claire spent another hour going through them, cross-referencing timelines, checking access logs, building a picture that looked nothing like the one that had been presented to her. By the time she finished, the Seattle sky had turned the deep purple of early evening, and her suspicion had hardened into something close to certainty. Someone had framed Ethan Cole. Someone with access to his credentials, familiarity with the system, and enough influence to rush through a termination before anyone could ask difficult questions. The question now was who, and why, and what Claire was going to do about it. She stood and straightened her jacket, preparing to return to the conference room where a man and his daughter waited without understanding why they were there. Claire had built her reputation on fairness and precision, on making decisions based on evidence rather than assumption. She had also built it on protecting what was hers, and if someone within DataStream had used her company to destroy an innocent man, that someone had made a serious mistake. The conference room door opened, and Claire stepped inside to find a scene that made her pause. Lily had fallen asleep in her chair, her head resting on the table, her small body curled into a position that looked deeply uncomfortable. Ethan sat beside her, one hand gently stroking her hair, his eyes fixed on her face with an expression of such profound love and worry that Claire felt something shift in her chest. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the exhaustion written in every line of his face. This was a man who had been carrying weight for a long time, long before today's disaster had added to the burden. A man who had been surviving rather than living, who had probably forgotten what it felt like to have someone in his corner. "She's tired," he said quietly, as if apologizing for his daughter's humanity. "She didn't sleep well last night. She knew something was wrong, even before I told her about." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Claire took the seat across from him, keeping her voice low to avoid waking the child. "Mr. Cole, I need you to tell me everything that happened on the day of the server crash. Every detail, no matter how insignificant you think it might be. I already told you. You gave me a summary. I need the full story. Start from the moment you woke up that morning." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for some indication of why this mattered, why the CEO of his former company was sitting in a conference room at 6 in the evening, asking him to relive the worst day of his professional life. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he took a deep breath and began to speak. Lily woke up around 5:30 with a low fever. Nothing serious, but enough that I couldn't send her to school. I tried calling my neighbor, Mrs. Huang, who usually helps when things like this happen, but she wasn't home. I tried 3 other backup options, but no one was available on such short notice. I thought about calling in sick, but I'd already used all my personal days for Lily's ear infection last month, and I knew missing another day would put my position at risk. He paused, his hand still resting on his daughter's hair. So, I made a decision. A bad one, probably, but the only one I could think of at the time. I brought her to work with me. I figured I could set her up in the sub-level maintenance area, which is usually empty, and check on her between tasks. It's not like I was working on anything critical that day, just routine diagnostics on the backup power systems. "What time did you arrive at the building?" "Around 7:45. I badged in through the parking garage entrance on the south side to avoid the main lobby. I didn't want anyone seeing Lily and asking questions." Shame colored his voice again. "I know it was against policy. I know I could have been written up just for having her there, but I didn't know what else to do." Claire nodded, her expression neutral. "Continue." "I got her settled in the break area around 8. She had her tablet, some snacks, a pillow from the car. She was feeling better by then, and she promised to stay quiet. I checked on her every hour or so throughout the morning. Around 2, she said she was tired, so I put on a movie and told her to rest. That's when I went to run the power diagnostics. I was down there when the crash happened. I didn't even know about it until my supervisor called me at 15:20, asking where I was and what I had done. "And you told him you were in the maintenance area?" "Yes. But he said the logs showed my credentials were used to access the server room at 14:30. I told him that was impossible, that I hadn't been anywhere near the server room all day. But he didn't believe me. No one did." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "They escorted me out of the building the next day. Didn't even give me a chance to review the evidence or make a statement. Said it was cut and dry, that the logs don't lie. But you were with Lily when the crash happened." "Yes, she can tell you. She was right there when I got the call." Claire was quiet for a moment, processing his account against the evidence she had reviewed. The timeline matched perfectly with what the badge records showed, and there, sleeping peacefully at the conference table, was a witness that no one had bothered to consult. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "has anyone other than you used your work credentials? Anyone who might have had access to your password?" Ethan frowned. "No. I mean, IT reset everyone's passwords a few months ago for security compliance, but I created a new one right away. I haven't shared it with anyone. Think carefully. Is there anyone in the company who might have wanted you removed from your position? Anyone who had a grudge, or who might have benefited from your absence?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't. I mean, I'm not exactly high profile. I don't have enemies. I just do my job and go home to my daughter." But something flickered across his face, a memory surfacing that he had perhaps dismissed as irrelevant. Claire caught it immediately. "What is it?" "It's probably nothing. But a few months ago, there was an opening for a senior systems position. Better pay, more responsibility. I applied for it, and I thought I had a good chance, but it went to someone else, a guy named Derek Vaughn. He's on the same team as me. Or he was, I guess." Ethan shook his head. "We never really got along. He's ambitious. The kind of guy who takes credit for other people's work and makes sure the bosses see him staying late. But framing someone for a server crash, that seems extreme, even for him." Claire stored the name away without comment. "Is there anything else? Anything at all that seemed unusual in the weeks before the incident?" "There was one thing," Ethan said slowly. "About a week before the crash, I noticed someone had been using my workstation during off hours. Small things, like the chair being adjusted differently, files being in different places than I left them. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but he said I was probably just misremembering. I started locking my station more carefully after that. But..." He trailed off, realization dawning on his face. "You don't think?" "I don't think anything yet," Claire interrupted. "But I intend to find out." She stood, smoothing the front of her jacket. "I'm going to need you to stay accessible for the next few days. Don't leave Seattle. And keep your phone on. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded, bewilderment written across his features. "Yes, but why? Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. I'm just a systems tech who got fired. Why does the CEO care?" Claire looked at him, then at the sleeping child, and something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Because the truth matters, Mr. Cole, and because I don't allow injustice to stand in my company." She left the conference room without another word, her mind already racing through the implications of what she had learned. Somewhere in Data Stream Solutions, someone had committed a deliberate act of sabotage and blamed it on an innocent man. Claire intended to find out who, and when she did, they would learn exactly what it meant to cross Claire Ashford. Lily stirred against the conference table, her small body shifting as consciousness slowly returned. Ethan watched her wake, feeling a mixture of love and guilt that had become familiar over the past 3 years. She was too young to carry the weight of his failures, too innocent to understand why her father kept losing the battles that mattered, and yet here she was, sleeping in a corporate conference room because he hadn't been able to protect their life from falling apart. "Daddy?" Her voice was thick with sleep, her eyes blinking against the fluorescent lights. "Where are we?" "Still at Daddy's work, sweetheart." "But we're going to leave soon." She sat up slowly, looking around the unfamiliar room with the caution of a child who had learned not to trust new environments. Her gaze landed on the door through which Claire had disappeared. "Who was that lady?" "Her name is Miss Ashford. She's very important here. Is she nice?" The question was so simple, so direct, and Ethan found he didn't know how to answer it. Was Claire Ashford nice? He had no idea. He barely knew what to make of the past few hours, of the CEO's sudden interest in his case, of her questions and her silence and her promise to find the truth. He only knew that for the first time since he had walked into that HR office, something that felt almost like hope had begun to stir in his chest. "I think she might be," he said finally. "I think she might be trying to help us." "Because you didn't do the bad thing?" Ethan's throat tightened. "How do you know about that, Lily?" "I heard the man on the phone. When he called you yesterday, he said you broke something important and that you were in big trouble." Her lower lip trembled. "But you didn't break it, Daddy. You were with me when the loud noises happened on your phone. You were showing me how to draw a cat." The memory hit him like a physical blow. He had been in the maintenance break room, sitting on the floor next to Lily's makeshift bed, demonstrating how to draw cartoon cat ears when his phone had erupted with frantic calls. He had stepped away to answer, but Lily had been right there, watching him with those big eyes, asking why everyone was yelling. "That's right, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough. "I was with you the whole time." "Then why did the man say you did it?" "Because sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they believe the wrong things. Can't you just tell them the truth?" "I tried, baby." But they didn't listen. Lily's face scrunched up in the way it did when she was thinking hard about something. "Maybe the lady will listen. She has nice eyes." Ethan pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair to hide the tears that threatened to spill. His 6-year-old daughter, with her innocent faith and her simple logic, had more confidence in Claire Ashford than he did. And maybe, just maybe, she was right, too. The door opened, and Claire stepped back into the room. Her expression was different now, more focused, more intense. She held a tablet in her hand and moved with the purpose of someone who had confirmed a suspicion. "Mr. Cole, I need you to tell me exactly where you were at 14:32 on the day of the incident. The exact location, the exact activity." Ethan straightened, keeping one arm around Lily. "I told you. I was in the sub-level 2 maintenance break room with Lily." "Drawing what?" "Cats." Lily wanted to learn how to draw cats. Claire's gaze shifted to the little girl. "Lily, do you remember that day? The day you came to work with your daddy?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I had a temperature. Daddy said I was warm like a toaster. And do you remember what you were doing when a lot of people started calling your daddy's phone?" "We were drawing," Lily said, echoing her father. "Daddy was teaching me ears. Cat ears are triangles." "How long had you been drawing before the phone calls started?" Lily thought about this carefully. "A while. I did 3 whole cats, one for me, one for Daddy, and one for Grandma in heaven." Ethan felt Claire's eyes on him, reading his reaction to his daughter's casual mention of his dead mother-in-law. He kept his face neutral, though the grief never really went away. "Thank you, Lily," Claire said softly. "You've been very helpful." She turned to Ethan, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made him sit up straighter. "The badge logs show you entering sub-level 2 at 14:31 and not leaving until 15:18. The security camera in the server room shows someone at your workstation at the time of the crash, but the image quality is too poor for facial identification. However, I can tell you that the person in that footage is not wearing a maintenance uniform." Ethan stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means someone used your credentials to access the server room while you were documented being somewhere else entirely. It means the physical evidence does not support the conclusion that led to your termination." "Then why? Why did they fire me without even checking?" Claire's expression hardened. "That's exactly what I intend to find out." Derek Vaughn was having a good week. His new office had a window that overlooked the parking lot, which wasn't exactly scenic but was significantly better than his old cubicle near the break room. His salary had increased by 15% with the senior systems position, and he had just received approval for a conference trip to San Francisco that would get him out of Seattle's perpetual gray drizzle. Yes, things were finally going his way. He was reviewing his calendar when his phone buzzed with an internal message that made his stomach drop. "Report to conference room 4A immediately. C. Ashford." Derek had never spoken directly to Claire Ashford in his 4 years at DataStream. He had seen her at company meetings, watched her deliver keynotes with the kind of composed authority that made people sit straighter in their chairs. But a personal summons? That was new. That was concerning. He straightened his tie and made his way to conference room 4A, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was about the Henderson account he had been managing. Maybe she wanted to commend him personally for his work. Maybe. He opened the door and found Claire Ashford seated at the head of the table, flanked by Marcus and a woman Derek recognized as DataStream's head of legal. The atmosphere in the room was decidedly not congratulatory. Mr. Vaughn. Please. Sit down. Derek sat, keeping his expression professionally neutral, despite the cold sweat beginning to form on his palms. I understand you were on shift the day of the server incident 3 weeks ago, Claire said. The one that resulted in Mr. Cole's termination. Yes, ma'am. Terrible situation. Ethan was always a bit careless, but I never thought he would do something like that. Interesting. Because I've been reviewing the evidence and I'm finding some inconsistencies I'd like you to help me understand. She turned the tablet toward him, displaying a spreadsheet of timestamps and locations. According to the badge logs, you accessed the server room at 14:28, 4 minutes before the crash. Would you care to explain what you were doing there? Derek felt his face flush. I must have been checking on a routine issue. Something with the cooling systems, I think. The maintenance report for that day shows no issues with the cooling systems. In fact, it shows no issues at all that would have required server room access by anyone other than the scheduled technician. Claire's voice remained perfectly level. Would you like to try again? I don't remember exactly. It was 3 weeks ago. But whatever I was doing, it certainly wasn't crashing the server. No, I don't imagine you'd phrase it quite that way. Claire leaned forward. Mr. Vaughn, I'm going to ask you a very direct question, and I would encourage you to think carefully before answering. Did you use Ethan Cole's credentials to access the primary server on the day of the incident? What? No. Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Then you won't mind explaining why IT security has traced unauthorized access to Mr. Cole's password from your personal laptop 3 days before the crash. The color drained from Derek's face. His mouth opened and closed several times before any words emerged. There must be some mistake. The IT team must have made an error. Our IT team doesn't make errors of that nature, Mr. Vaughn. And even if they did, it wouldn't explain the security footage showing someone in a dark jacket at Workstation 7 at the time of the crash. A dark jacket identical to the one hanging on your office coat rack right now. Derek's composure finally cracked. His carefully constructed facade of professional confidence crumbled, revealing something ugly underneath. Desperation and fear. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising. I deserved that promotion. I've been here longer than Cole. I've worked harder, but everyone kept talking about how reliable he was, how thorough. He was going to get it. I could see it happening. So I just wanted to level the playing field a little. I didn't think anyone would actually get hurt. It was supposed to be a minor incident, something that would make him look careless. But the crash was bigger than I expected, and by the time I realized what had happened, it was too late to take it back. The legal director was already typing rapidly on her laptop, documenting every word. Marcus stood by the door, his expression carefully blank in the way of people who had just witnessed something they would never forget. Claire rose from her seat, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of cold fury that made everyone in the room instinctively lean back. You deliberately sabotaged company systems. You framed an innocent man. You cost him his job, his reputation, and nearly his ability to provide for his daughter. And you did all of this because you were jealous of a promotion. I can explain. You just did. Claire turned to the legal director. Contact building security. Mr. Vaughn is not to leave this room until the police arrive. I want a full accounting of his activities over the past 6 months, and I want to know if there are any other incidents he might be connected to. She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at Derek with an expression that made him shrink in his chair. You thought no one would notice. You thought an innocent man would pay for your ambition. But I notice everything, Mr. Vaughn. Everything. She walked out without another word, leaving Derek to contemplate the ruins of his career and, quite possibly, his freedom. The news spread through DataStream like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that Derek Vaughn had been escorted out by security, that Ethan Cole had been wrongfully terminated, and that Claire Ashford herself had uncovered the truth. The company's internal communication channels buzzed with speculation and shock, with people who had readily accepted Ethan's guilt now expressing outrage at the injustice. Ethan received the call at 7 in the morning, while he was making Lily's breakfast in their small kitchen. The voice on the other end was Marcus, Claire's assistant, asking if he could come to the office at his earliest convenience. "Miss Ashford would like to speak with you personally," Marcus said. "If you need arrangements for your daughter, we can provide childcare services at the building." An hour later, Ethan found himself back at DataStream, walking through the same hallways he had been escorted out of in disgrace just days before. This time, people looked at him differently. Some nodded with something like respect. Others avoided his gaze entirely, perhaps ashamed of their own quick judgment. Claire met him in her office, not the conference room. The space was exactly as imposing as he had imagined, but she seemed somehow smaller within it, more human. She stood by the window, looking out at the bay, and turned when he entered. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. You found out the truth," he said. "It wasn't a question. Derek Vaughn has been terminated and is facing criminal charges for unauthorized computer access and fraud. The company will be cooperating fully with the investigation." She paused. "I owe you an apology. You didn't do anything wrong. I allowed an innocent man to be wrongfully terminated under my watch. The fact that others were directly responsible doesn't absolve me of my failure to ensure proper oversight." She met his eyes. "Your termination has been rescinded. Your record has been cleared, and if you're willing, I'd like to offer you a new position." Ethan blinked. "A new position? Senior Systems Analyst. It's the role that should have been yours in the first place. Better pay, better hours, and an office with an actual window." A small smile crossed her face. "Though I'm told the view is mostly of the parking lot." He didn't know what to say. 3 days ago, he had been facing unemployment and the prospect of losing everything he had worked to build for Lily. Now he was being offered not just his job back, but a promotion. "Why?" he asked finally. "You barely know me. Why go through all this trouble?" Claire was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "When I saw you in that hallway, I saw a man who was trying to hide his devastation from his daughter. A man who cared more about protecting her from fear than defending himself from injustice. That told me something about your character." She moved to her desk and picked up a small framed photograph, the one he had noticed earlier. The silver-haired woman with Claire's eyes. "My mother raised me alone," she said. "She worked 3 jobs to put me through school. She never complained, never made excuses, never let me see how hard it was. But I knew. I saw it in the way she fell asleep at the kitchen table, in the shoes she wore until they fell apart. I promised myself that if I ever had the power to help someone in her situation, I would. I haven't always kept that promise as well as I should have, but I'm trying." She set the photograph down. "The truth matters, Mr. Cole. And so do the people who fight to protect those they love. You're one of those people. DataStream is lucky to have you." Ethan felt something break loose in his chest, some knot of tension and grief that had been tightening for years. "I don't know how to thank you. Take the job. Do good work. Raise your daughter." Claire extended her hand. "That will be thanks enough." He shook it, feeling the firmness of her grip, the steadiness of her gaze. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Cole allowed himself to believe that things might actually be okay. In the lobby, Lily sat in a comfortable chair in the childcare area, working intently on a drawing. When she saw her father approaching, she leaped up and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up the paper proudly. It was a drawing of 3 figures. A tall man with brown hair, a small girl with pigtails, and a woman in a gray suit. They were all holding hands, standing under a yellow sun. "That's you, and that's me, and that's the nice lady," Lily explained. "She found the truth, right?" "That's what you said." Ethan looked at the drawing, at his daughter's interpretation of the events that had upended their lives and then, miraculously, set them right. "Yeah, sweetheart. She found the truth. Can we show her?" He hesitated, thinking of Claire's schedule, her responsibilities, the 100 important things that surely demanded her attention. But before he could answer, a voice came from behind him. "Show me what?" Claire stood there, having apparently been on her way out when she noticed them. Lily thrust the drawing toward her without hesitation. "I made this for you, because you helped my daddy." Claire took the paper, and Ethan watched something extraordinary happen. The composed, powerful CEO of DataStream Solutions, the woman who had just orchestrated the exposure and arrest of a corporate saboteur, looked at a child's crayon drawing and smiled. Not the professional smile she wore in meetings, but something genuine and unguarded. "This is beautiful, Lily," she said. "I'm going to hang it in my office." "Really?" "Really. Right where I can see it every day." Lily beamed, and Ethan felt his eyes sting. 3 days ago, he had walked through these doors believing he had lost everything. Now he stood here with his daughter, watching her give a homemade gift to the woman who had given them back their future. "Thank you," he said to Claire, and the words felt inadequate for everything they contained. She looked at him over Lily's head, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond professional obligation or corporate policy. Recognition of shared experience, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of what it meant to fight for the people who depended on you. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole," she said. And then, turning to Lily with that same genuine smile, "And welcome to DataStream, Lily. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of each other." They walked out of the building together, Ethan and his daughter, into a Seattle morning that had somehow managed to produce actual sunshine. Behind them, the glass towers of DataStream gleamed in the unexpected light, and somewhere on the executive floor, a crayon drawing found its place on the wall of the most powerful office in the building. It wasn't the ending Ethan had expected when he had stood in that HR office, clutching a termination letter and trying not to fall apart in front of his child. But perhaps that was the nature of truth. It had a way of surfacing when you least expected it. Carried on the determination of those who refused to let injustice stand. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it came in the form of a woman who saw a piece of paper and decided to look deeper.